My name is Jim, and along with my wife Terry and my son Joe, we started a fellowship we're calling Shiloh Qahal in the early part of 2024. In way of explaining the name, Shiloh's not all that different or strange, and we selected it because it's the town in northern Israel where the Ark of the Covenant and the tabernacle rested during the days of the judges and Samuel and during King Saul's reign and the early part of David's reign before he moved it to Jerusalem. Um, and to us, it symbolizes and represents the presence of the ark, the presence of our Father, the presence of Yahuwah, the presence of our Elohim. The word kahal is a little less common in our society, in our culture, but kahal is just simply the English translation of the Hebrew word for assembly. That Hebrew word, when the Greeks translated it, they translated it as ecclesia. And then when the modern translators started grabbing the Greek manuscripts to translate from, they translated the word ecclesia into the word church. So kahal is not, it's just the Hebrew version of the Greek word ecclesia and or the Hebrew word of the English word church. It basically represents the assembly of the called out ones, the assembly of believers. So the reason that we started Shiloh Qahal is that Terry and I have been longtime believers, me since the early to mid 80s and her even prior to that. And we've always been serious. We've been hard studiers of the word. We pull them out a lot and are very familiar with the scriptures as much as we could be. I had been I had been looking for answers because there are things that I read and that I see that I was struggling with. And things happened a few years back that caused me to delve deeper than I had been into many messages and many avenues that I had not delved in before. And while doing that, I stumbled across some information I just never heard. And when I began to, it just all made sense when I began to reread scriptures against some of this new information that I was hearing. It all began to take life, and the scriptures began to come together, and I was able to tie the old and the new writings together, and things just began to make sense. But as it began to make sense, then I found myself really falling away from the teachings of the church and unable to sit under an awful lot of what the church embraces today. And one of the more common and basic issues is really, what do we do with Israel and what do we do with Torah? Well, that's a huge, big question. And as Terry and I began to just try to embrace it and study it and learn it, because it was just so, we grew up and we've been taught that the law had passed and there's a good reason for it, that we're in a new covenant and a new relationship and all of the things that we know come with church teaching. But what I've been finding leads us to take another look at Torah. Well, again, it's a big question, and I plan to do some videos to explain our positions more fully than I can do here, or that you want me to do here. But we are trying to evaluate what our positions are with regard to the Torah, knowing now that we must respect it and that it really becomes something I need to be focused on, that we need to be focused on and studying and learning. But one of the most basic things, some of the basic things are, what do you do with the Sabbath, and what do you do with the feast days, and what do you do with the dietary restrictions? What do you do with Sunday? What do you do with, just what do you do with some of the basic things that the church has removed from? It's removed from our culture, and I don't know if the church removed it from our culture, or if our culture removed it from the church. It doesn't really matter. It's just not there. And now we're trying to learn how to manipulate it or to work our way through it. And one of the most basic and fundamental issues at hand. And the most serious has to do with the Sabbath. And it is not just a day observed by the Israelites or ancient Israel. No, it predates them. It goes all the way back to creation. And as I'll show you in another video, it's being kept. It's being kept by Yahweh in the heavens. It's being kept by the messengers in the heavens, and those are the angels. And I'm sorry, I know I'm using some words that are not common in our culture, and I will also do a video to explain the restored names and some of the language that we're using and why we're doing it. We're not doing it to be weird or strange. It just is now becoming our vernacular and our way of speaking of things, and some of it's being driven by the versions and the translations that we're now also reading. But the Sabbath is being kept by Elohim, by God in heaven, by the angels in heaven, and it always has been. And it is a sign of covenant. So it's a very, very important thing. So we are now meeting, and that's one of the primary reasons that we're meeting and started this fellowship, is so that we could meet on the seventh day, on the Sabbath, and have a gathering like they did, where we could study scriptures like they did, and share meals together like they did, and fellowship together like they did in the early church and actually throughout the history of Israel. So, what are the basics of Shiloh Qahal? What are our objectives? Well, first and foremost, we wish to learn and remain teachable. We seek to gather and test information as it becomes available, but neither do we wish to be blown around by every wind of doctrine. And we remember the Sabbath to keep it separate, which is the seventh day, and in our culture that's Saturday. It's the day to gather, to learn, to break bread, and to fellowship. We evaluate and learn the law or the Torah and consider how it applies to us today and how it's applicable to us, with an open mind and a willingness to obey what we find to be relevant to us. And we embrace our identity as the covenant people Israel, knowing that Messiah is from Israel and comes to Israel as Savior and Redeemer. And this might be a good opportunity to affirm our belief and faith in Messiah as our Savior and only hope. There is no salvation, no pardon for sin or resurrection from the dead apart from Him. One is not justified and cannot obtain salvation by keeping the law or Torah. We are justified and receive salvation as a gift by belief in Messiah alone. But we have come to the understanding that guarding and keeping Torah is how we honor, worship, and obey Him, because He instructs us so, and because we want to. We've also embraced restoring the names of Elohim in our worship and study. The name of the Almighty Elohim is not the Lord. It is a Hebrew name spelled with Hebrew characters, and we neither speak nor write in Hebrew. The closest English rendering or translation we have are the consonants YHWH. We have embraced the English rendering of Yahuwah. The Messiah also has a Hebrew name. The Greek rendering of this name is then rendered into English as Jesus, but if we bypass the English translation of how the Greeks rendered this name and go straight to the English translation of the original Hebrew name, then his name is more appropriately something close to Yahushua. And once we restore the names of Elohim and also restore the names of kings and prophets, one sees how Elohim's name is placed on and throughout his people. For example, the name Yahuwah can be shortened to Yah or Yahu. And then when we look at the Hebrew names, the prominence of his name becomes evident. For instance, Isaiah becomes Yeshayahu. Jeremiah becomes Yirmiyahu. Judah becomes Yahudah. Hezekiah becomes Hizkiyahu. And then the prominent reference to the Almighty as Elohim in the plural and El in the singular also becomes evident in the names of prophets and kings. For instance, Daniel becomes Daniel, Ezekiel becomes Yehezkiel, Samuel becomes Shemuel, etc. It seems apparent that the Greek language is infused with deistic words that have origin and meaning related to their various deities. As base manuscripts for modern translations, these words are translated into English words that can have similarities, although the typical person would not recognize them as such. There are translations that restore the names of Elohim, kings, prophets, locations, and nations, and they attempt to eliminate deistic words utilizing different or replacement words, or English translations from what the base Hebrew word would have been. Although we recognize the increased difficulty level they present, we are predominantly utilizing these translations in our study and meetings because we value the additional information, understanding, and the insights they bring. And we recognize that the names and words of these translations are working their way into our references and conversations, which makes us sound unconventional. Sounding different is not the objective, but it is a byproduct. So we're digging and we're learning. And if you're interested in digging and learning alongside of us and you're in our area, then we invite you to meet with us on Sabbath. We'll also be creating and sharing videos on various topics as we go along. So here's our YouTube channel. It's at Shiloh Qahal. Clearly we don't have very many videos or followers yet, but we are getting ready to start producing some videos, and we'll start to populate that with some things, some topics. And here is our Facebook page, and we will probably not utilize it quite as much, be more of a messaging, but we may also attach some of our videos to that as well.